It's January 31st here in Seoul, and I'm Choi Min-jung. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the deadly plane crash in the U.S. The mid-air collision between a passenger plane and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night is believed to have killed all 67 people on board the two aircraft. Two teenage figure skaters of Korean descent were among the victims. Detained President Yoon prepares for an intense legal battle as he is set to face both impeachment and criminal trials. President Yoon is allowed general visits starting today. The third phase of the prisoner hostage exchange between Israel and Hamas has been completed, with 8 hostages released in exchange for 110 Palestinian prisoners. A collision between a military helicopter and a passenger plane carrying 64 people in Washington, D.C. has killed all 67 people on board both aircraft. It was the deadliest aviation accident in the U.S. since 2001. Our Shin Ha-young starts us off.
Rescue efforts went on through the night, but no survivors were found from the deadly collision of an American Airlines aircraft and the Army helicopter. U.S. authorities announced that 28 bodies had been recovered and believe all 67 people on board died.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
A U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter on a training flight collided with American Airlines Flight 5342 on Wednesday night local time while approaching Ronald Reagan National Airport near Washington, D.C., sending the two aircraft plummeting into the Potomac River, the deadliest U.S. air crash since 2001. The jet had departed from Wichita, Kansas with 60 passengers and 4 crew members, while the helicopter had 3 military personnel on board. According to AP, less than 30 seconds before the crash, an air traffic controller asked the helicopter if it had the arriving plane in sight. According to CBS News, figure skating athletes and their coaches were on board the plane, including teenagers Gina Han and Spencer Lane, who are believed to be of Korean descent. They were returning home from the National Development Camp, which was held in connection with the recent U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita. U.S. President Donald Trump shared his condolences and paid tribute to the victims and families ahead of the press conference. But he then criticized the previous administration, indicating that its diversity, equity, and inclusion program for air traffic controllers at the Federal Aviation Administration were partially to blame for the crash.
And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters there appeared to have been an elevation issue with the helicopter and said Army investigators were on the ground looking into the matter. Meanwhile, South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol expressed his deep sorrow over the plane crash. The Seoul government is working to obtain a passenger list, though it is still unclear if any Korean nationals were on board. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Now, moving on to the domestic front, with President Yoon's impeachment trial ongoing, he is also expected to participate in a criminal trial on charges of insurrection. Meanwhile, Yoon's team is making preparations to defend the president. For more, we have our Park Ko-nu standing by live near the Seoul Central District Court. Ko-nu, how are the trials proceeding?
Morning, Min-jung. As mentioned, I'm near the Central District Court in southern Seoul, where President Yoon's criminal trial on charges of insurrection following his indictment by the prosecution is set to take place possibly in March. The panel of judges for the case is expected to be announced as early as Friday, that's today. Then after pretrial preparations in February, the trial will actually begin. Usually such preparations for a criminal trial takes about 2 to 3 months, but given given that this is an unprecedented trial of a sitting president who has been arrested, there are expectations that it will proceed faster than usual. Accordingly, Yoon's defense is facing two different trials, the Constitutional Court's impeachment trial and the criminal trial. This could result in the president undergoing at least 3 hearings a week, as those for the impeachment will resume their twice-weekly schedule from next week. Yoon previously expressed his intention to attend all hearings.
And now, how has Yoon been preparing for these trials?
So President Yoon has continued meeting with his defense team even during the Lunar New Year holidays that ended yesterday, which is Thursday, to discuss trial preparations, though details remain undisclosed. That came after the team submitted over 100 of evidence to the Constitutional Court on January 26th, with some pundits believe may be a strategy to delay the impeachment trial. One possible scenario for Yoon and his defense team is to request bail to participate in the trials without detention. The court could deny the bail request due to concerns about evidence tampering, but could also accept the request with conditions such as prohibiting contact with related parties. Another possibility is requesting the suspension of the impeachment trial. That's based on a Constitutional Court Act that allows the suspension of such a trial when a criminal trial is also ongoing over the same matter.
And I hear regular visitation to the detention center where President Yoon is at is allowed starting today. Can you tell us more?
That's correct. So, as you mentioned, general visitation to the Seoul Detention Center where President Yoon is currently being held will be available starting today. These visits are expected to take place once a day with only a few people allowed. And so, high-ranking officials from the presidential office are expected to visit President Yoon this morning. And members of the People Power Party are also planning their visits. Well, First Lady Kim Gun-hee is reportedly not planning to visit at the moment. So that's all I have for you now. Back to you, Min-jung.
All right, Konu, thank you for that coverage. That was our Park Konu reporting live from the Seoul Central District Court. President Yoon's impeachment trial is now halfway into the proceedings. It resumes next Tuesday, and that trial hearing will include testimonies from 3 key witnesses to Yoon's martial law decree. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
The Constitutional Court will resume President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial following a break for the Lunar New Year holidays. According to legal sources, the Constitutional Court will hold Yoon's 5th hearing on Tuesday at 2 p.m. This will mark the 5th hearing in the case, with a focus on questioning key witnesses requested by the National Assembly, which is arguing for Yoon's impeachment. Beginning at 2:30 p.m., 3 witnesses will each undergo 90 minutes of questioning. Lee Jin-woo, former commander of the Capital Defense Command, and Yo In-young, former chief of Military Counterintelligence Command, have both been arrested as key figures implicated in the execution of martial law. Lee reportedly received calls from President Yoon to drag out legislators from parliament to stop them from voting to lift martial law, while Yo was in charge of searching and seizing the National Election Commission. Former intelligence official Hong Jang-won will also testify. Hong has already said he received orders, including from the president, to totally round up and clean up political opponents. During the previous hearing, Yoon denied he gave such orders. Also, former Defense Minister Kim Yong-yeon testified that the president meant for military members to be pulled out of the assembly, not members of parliament. As judges cross-examine the witnesses and their conflicting testimonies, the panel can ask their own question during the session. Yoon is likely to attend every trial hearing and also question witnesses himself, as he did in the previous hearing. With 4 hearings left until February 13th for now, the timing of the verdict is still unclear. Observers say the earliest verdict could come by the end of February, but could be delayed if justices approve more witnesses requested by Yoon's side. They could also postpone the hearings considering the pace of Yoon's criminal trial. Justices have been emphasizing they will hold swift trial proceedings given the magnitude of the president's impeachment case and its impact on the country. Most believe a decision will be made before 2 justices step down from the panel in April when their tenures expire. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
As our Park Konu reported earlier, both the impeachment and criminal trials are likely to proceed simultaneously, requiring Yoon to attend hearings 3 times a week. To discuss what lies ahead, we're joined by Professor Cho Hee-kyung this morning for more. Welcome, Professor. It's been a couple of days since President Yoon Suk-yeol was noticed on charges of leading an insurrection, and the case is expected to be assigned to a court as early as today. What can we expect once the court takes over?
Explaining that this will follow the usual criminal trial procedure. So once the court is constituted, the judges are actually selected by this automated process, then the prosecution will present its case first, and then Yoon's team, his defense team, will present their defense, and there will be cross-examination by both sides of witnesses that would appear, etc. And so in the former President Park Geun-hye's case, she also had to face criminal trial as well as the impeachment process. And her initial trial actually took close to a year until the verdict. But because Yoon is facing just one charge, which is the charge of insurrection, I believe that this particular trial will take much less time than, so it won't be as long as 1 year. But I strongly suspect that this will not be the only criminal proceedings that Yoon will have to face. There are a lot of other allegations arising out of various accusations of abuse of office that he has committed during his time in the presidential office, including the death of the Marine, what actually happened surrounding the Itaewon tragedy, and possibly events of obstruction of justice, etc., etc. So even once this insurrection criminal trial is over, I suspect that he will probably be facing other criminal charges, and there may be further parallel proceedings ongoing.
Right, and you briefly mentioned previous former presidents who faced indictment often refused to appear in court or remained silent during questioning. And as the first sitting president to be indicted, all eyes are on how President Yoon will respond. So how do you think he will approach the trial?
Well, if we look at how he's approaching the impeachment process, the impeachment trial at the moment, he's actively defending himself. He's actually appearing in court and questioning witnesses himself, and also providing testimonies of his own. Now, this is very different to the behavior of two previous impeachment trials that we've had of two previous presidents. And so I believe that he will probably take similar approach in the criminal trial, especially because he has been a prosecutor for most of his professional life. And so I believe that he will be actively mounting defense and questioning and cross-examining witnesses himself. And depending on how long the trial lasts and how many other criminal trials actually proceed, he may simply run out of funds to be able to afford lawyers, in which case, the necessity will arise for him to actually mount defense for himself.
Right, and President Yoon's legal team is reportedly planning to request bail following the Seollal holiday. So what might be their strategy behind this decision, and what are the possible outcomes if the request is denied?
Well, obviously, if a defendant is in custody, the defendant has the right to request bail, but and the law actually says, Criminal Procedure Act states that unless there are exceptions, a defendant's request for bail should be granted. But one of the exceptions is where the defendant is actually facing a charge where the penalty is life sentence or death sentence. And the charge of criminal insurrection is indeed a crime where Yoon will be charged as is accused of being the head of insurrection, and the penalty for being the head of an insurrection is, in fact, life or death sentence. And so I don't think it's likely that he will be granted bail, leaving aside all these questions about destruction of evidence, etc., etc. And so I believe that he will be facing criminal trial while still in custody.
Right, and alongside the criminal trial, President Yoon is also facing impeachment proceedings, and the Constitutional Court is speeding up the process, with some expecting a ruling by March. Do you think that timeline is realistic?
Well, in fact, I believe most watchers were actually predicting end of February because, as you said, the court is really trying to expedite the process because they don't want this uncertain situation to last any longer than it has to. And so they've been setting 2 hearing dates per week. But I think it will depend on how many witnesses Yoon's team wants to call before the court and how many of those witnesses the court will approve. So again, looking at the past example of Park Geun-hye's case, Park Geun-hye didn't appear herself in the impeachment trial, but her team wanted to call up to 50 witnesses, and the court, I believe, approved a handful. And something similar might happen with Yoon's defense team. They might try to, call a barrage of witnesses right at the end. And because the Constitutional Court is really trying to be very careful to ensure that Yoon gets the full opportunity to defend himself, they may grant some of the requests, not all of dozens and dozens of witnesses they might want to call, but depending on that schedule, so depending on how many additional witnesses are called, the judgment may not come until beginning of March, even middle of March.
Right, and President Yoon has denied all allegations, including the ordering of arrests of politicians and forcibly removing National Assembly members under martial law, and given multiple testimonies claiming direct orders from him. Why is he maintaining the stance? Could this strategy backfire in the impeachment hearings?
Well, indeed, it was almost as if he was rehearsing his arguments for his criminal trial when I was listening to his own testimonies and his questioning of witnesses in the Constitutional Court. I don't think that particular strategy is working very well before the Constitutional Court, but he may have sort of he might have thought that, well, he will be removed from the office in any case, that he might, there is no real possibility that the Constitutional Court is going to reject the impeachment of Yoon. And so he might be actually focusing more on the defending himself in the criminal trial, because the outcome for if he is found guilty in the criminal trial is that he may actually be facing life in prison, whereas the outcome of the impeachment process is removal from the office. And he might have given up on the hope that he might actually be restored back to the presidential office, because even if you were the most hopeful person in the world, I think given the situation, it'll be very difficult to imagine that Yoon would actually be restored to the presidential office.
Right, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you very much.
Comments from U.S. President Donald Trump's pick for Commerce Secretary is causing concern for U.S. allies and the global trade market. The nominee backed plans to impose levies on foreign goods while possibly backing out of subsidies signed under the Biden administration. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
President Trump's nominee to lead the Commerce Department, Howard Lutnick, backed Trump's plans to impose tariffs and stated that American allies, including South Korea, have exploited the United States in trade. During his Senate confirmation hearing on Wednesday, Lutnick claimed that Washington will need to work closely with allies such as Tokyo and Seoul in order to push foreign companies toward US-based manufacturing. These remarks came in response to a question that asked about his plans to promote joint investments with allies to stimulate growth in the US. Lutnick made clear that tariffs would serve as a tool to encourage domestic manufacturing and emphasized that while tariffs on China should be the highest, allies should not expect any exceptions.
We need to be treated better. We need to be treated with respect, and we can use tariffs to create reciprocity, fairness, and respect.
He also addressed Trump's recent announcement of a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada, scheduled to take effect at the start of next month, clarifying that these tariffs are separate from general trade tariffs. He explained that these specific tariffs aim to curb illegal immigration and fentanyl trafficking and would not be implemented if both countries cooperate on these issues. As for general trade tariffs, he revealed his preference for across-the-board tariffs by country, suggesting that he favors tariffs applied across all goods rather than specific goods categories. Lutnick expressed skepticism about subsidies provided under the Biden administration through the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, raising concerns about how South Korean firms investing in the U.S. might be negatively affected. Tech giants Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix have made significant investments in the U.S. based on these incentives, but Lutnick stated that even if contracts under the CHIPS Act were finalized under the Biden administration, they would need to be reviewed. He also opposed a tax credit for leased electric vehicles, a provision under the IRA that has benefited South Korean auto companies such as Hyundai Motor. The hearing also addressed growing concerns over China's advances in artificial intelligence, including the recent breakthroughs by DeepSeek, a Chinese AI company. Lutnick advocated for stringent export controls and tariffs to curb China's technological rise and accused DeepSeek of stealing intellectual property from the U.S. 문혜련, Arirang News.
The third phase of the prisoner hostage release between Israel and the Palestinian group Hamas took place on Thursday. 8 hostages comprising 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals were released by Hamas. Among the 3 Israeli hostages, one was a female soldier in her 20s as well as a man in his 80s, the other being a female in her 20s. In exchange, Israel released 110 Palestinian prisoners. So far, 7 Israeli hostages and 290 Palestinian prisoners have been released in 2 previous exchanges. Netflix announced on Thursday that it will release the 3rd season of Squid Game on June 27th. Calling it the final season, Netflix released teasers. The 3rd season was filmed consecutively with Season 2, which consisted of just 7 episodes. The final one will be released just 6 months after the release of the 2nd, while the 2nd season was screened over 3 years after the 1st. Netflix said earlier this month that Season 2 will be one of the most watched original series seasons, with the number of views in the 4th quarter of last year standing at 165.7 million.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Starting in Ukraine, a Russian drone strike on Thursday local time hit an apartment building in the northeastern Sumy region, killing at least 9 people and injuring 13 others. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the attack a horrific tragedy and a terrible crime. The strike occurred just after 1 a.m. local time when an Iranian-made Shahed drone crashed into a multi-story residential building, destroying 5 apartments and damaging over 20 vehicles. Among the injured are several children. Ukraine's Air Force stated that Russia launched 81 drones overnight, targeting homes and businesses across the country. While 37 drones were shot down and 39 others jammed, 5 made direct impact. Drone strikes in southern Odessa and central Poltava also caused significant damage, though no casualties have been reported there. Moving over to Uganda, a 32-year-old nurse has died of Ebola virus. His death on Wednesday local time at a hospital in the capital, Kampala, marks the first fatality from the viral disease in 2 years. The nurse received prompt medical intervention after showing symptoms, including high fever, chest pain, difficult breathing, and bleeding, but died shortly after testing positive for Ebola. Health authorities are tracing 40 contacts who had contact with him to prevent further transmission. The health ministry has urged the public to remain vigilant, stick to preventive measures, and immediately report any suspected cases. This marks Uganda's 9th outbreak of Ebola, with the first coming in 2000. In the U.S., scientists reported on Wednesday that NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft has returned approximately 122 grams of material from near-Earth asteroid Bennu, providing insights into the early solar system. Preliminary analysis revealed that the sample contains ammonia, suggesting that the material likely formed in a cold region of the solar system beyond Jupiter's orbit. Scientists have also identified 11 minerals that likely existed in a saltwater environment, suggesting the presence of liquid water in its history. The findings provide a better understanding of water in the early solar system and the origins of life on Earth.
The long solar holiday has passed in the blink of an eye, but the snowy and freezing weather made the travel harsh in many parts of the country over the holiday. Snowy conditions continue in central parts of Korea today. In between 1 and 5 centimeters of snow are in the forecast throughout the day. In northern parts of Gyeongsang-Pukdo province could see a mix of rain and snow. Well, holiday snow has not completely melted yet on the sidewalks, so please walk and drive with care. The cold snap has eased. Afternoon highs will be 1 to 5 degrees higher today, getting up to 2 degrees Celsius in Seoul and Chuncheon, Daegu, Busan at 10 degrees. Weekend weather looks promising with warmth, but there could be more wintry precipitation across Korea. Then there will be a major cold snap next week. Mornings will go down to below minus 10 degrees Celsius in the capital, despite Monday marking Impeachment, the onset of spring on the seasonal calendar. So please get ready for freezing morning commute next week.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. New Day at Arirang will be back on Monday, 10 a.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.